Good morning, AWS, and welcome to the AWS Morning Brief. I'm cloud economist Corey Quinn, and as just mentioned, this is the AWS Morning Brief. This episode is sponsored by our friends at New Relic. You'd think I would be talking about a company that's more modern than that, because, let's be honest, they've been around for a while. But they've changed things lately. They've stopped doing their old pricing model. It's now much more reasonable and easy to predict. They threw in a free tier, which I'm a huge fan of. They've gone open source, and they've really, I don't mean to be unkind, they've really improved everything that I used to hate about them. Take a look for yourself and see if you agree. Visit newrelic.com to learn more. Now, what happened last week in the world of AWS? Kind of a lot. Let's dive into it. The Amazon API Gateway now supports mutual TLS authentication. This is screamingly exciting for me, but I can't tell you why until after I've implemented it, because otherwise I have a problem. More to come in future weeks. Amazon CloudWatch Agent is now open source and included with Amazon Linux too. Ignoring the second part of that, this is pretty awesome. Usually companies don't open source things while they make a bunch of excuses that hide the real reason, which is that their code is embarrassingly bad. Amazon CloudWatch dashboards now support sharing, and I swear to you, the first time I read that, I misread it as shaming, and my response was, well, so what? I've been using CloudWatch dashboards to shame people for years. Nope, you can now share them to improve your shaming. Amazon Detective introduces IAM role session analysis, which of course means, because we're talking about the Amazon Detective, the pounding on my office door matched the pounding in my head. My landlord was demanding rent, but I wouldn't get paid until this case got cracked. Amazon EKS is now available in the AWS US West, Northern California region. I rarely mention regional expansions, but really? Kubernetes only now comes to the Northern California region? You know, you really don't want to use US West 1, in case you didn't already know that. It's expensive, slow to get new things, and just isn't a very nice place. Also, we're currently on fire. Amazon Redshift announces spatial functionality enhancements. Okay, I read this article 5 times, and I still have no better idea what it does because it is incomprehensible jargon. If you go to totes-not-amazon.com and let a Markov chain generate an AWS release announcement, it will be more coherent than this post is. I'm suddenly understanding why Snowflake is doing so very well post-IPO. Amazon Transcribe adds support for automatic language identification. Why doesn't AWS's machine learning marketing team highlight things like this? It is magical to me that you can analyze audio and then just determine what language is being spoken. That's hard. People have trouble with that. It is transformative. It is uplifting, and it is given no real marketing attention whatsoever. Apparently, because this is ML, it doesn't help the cops hunt homeless people for sport or whatever it is they choose to lift up. Stories that empower communication and break down barriers are so incredibly powerful. I wish they would tell more of them. Analyzing Amazon S3 server access logs using Amazon Elasticsearch. This blog post tells you how to take access logs for what's accessing S3, which costs 2.3 cents per month per gigabyte, and store those logs in Amazon Elasticsearch, which costs 13.5 cents per month per gigabyte, because they're apparently hoping you've been ignoring me whenever I talk about Chaos Search. Why would someone do this? Speaking of Chaos Search, they are also sponsoring this episode. That last comment was, of course, a freebie. What is Chaos Search up to? Well, glad you asked. This week, September 24th to be precise, there's a webinar with me called Turning Your Amazon S3 into a Hot Searchable Data Data Lake. During this webinar, at which I will be speaking, you'll learn how to monitor and analyze your AWS services directly within S3. Go ahead and register. Visit snark.cloud/datalakes to sign up. Also, you'll hear more about my favorite thing that they've done called Ultra Hot. More to come. Again, that's snark.cloud/data lakes. And thanks, as always, to Chaos Search for supporting my ridiculous nonsense. AWS Budgets now offers daily granularity for cost and usage budgets. The caveat to this working, of course, is that all of a day's spend needs to accurately be reported within 24 hours. It's not always capable of doing that. AWS IQ now supports short URLs for expert profiles, and man, could this be so much more than it is. A short URL that AWS hosts that becomes a non-crappy version of LinkedIn meets GitHub that, oh, by the way, lets you pay me via your AWS bill? Who on earth would say no to this? It could be more than it is, and I hope it becomes that. Amazon CloudFront announces support for Brotli compression. If you visit the Brotli GitHub page, it's entirely unclear just what the hell it does. AWS Marketing has stolen a march on them and explains it clearly in this link post, which is Brotli is a widely supported lossless compression algorithm that often provides a better compression ratio than gzip. That's all it takes. Well done. Elasticsearch audit logs now available on Amazon's Elasticsearch service. Technically, the logs themselves live in CloudWatch logs because otherwise it would be self-auditing, which is how you get punched in the face by an auditor. Enforce encryption for Amazon Elastic File System resources using AWS IAM. This seems handy and maddening if you don't know it's there, because it's a near certainty that the error message will be completely useless. HIPAA-eligible AWS services deployed in AWS Wavelength can now be used to process protected health information. Our 5G offering can now support health data is the kind of offering that, while useful, will no doubt be taken and twisted by the worst conspiracy theorists on the internet. New T4G instances, burstable performance powered by AWS Graviton 2. Try them for free. Due to a misunderstanding that I'm sure we're all going to laugh about later, many AWS services still don't support tagging, but they do support T4G instances instead. Activity detection on a live video stream with Amazon SageMaker. If there's no activity detected, then it's apparently either dead video or sleeping video. AWS debuts Cloud Digital Interface, AWS CDI, to reliably transport uncompressed live video between applications. You can now get enormous bandwidth between EC2 instances inside of AWS. Now, 98% of the world will completely forget that this thing exists, but somewhere, listen to this in Hollywood, an engineer at an entertainment company just dropped their coffee cup in excitement and is almost peeing themselves because this changes everything they do. Remember, not every service is for you. And lastly, simplifying permissions management at scale using tags in AWS organizations. I finally rolled out the ability to set tags to every engineer in the entire company so they can allocate costs. Now, to put on my CISO hat, take a giant sip of this burning hot coffee, and read this blog post. That's right, you've caused a giant security problem for yourself. And that's what happened last week, and that last one next week, in the world of AWS. My name's Corey Quinn, and if you've enjoyed this podcast or hated this podcast, I don't care. Leave a 5-star rating anyway at lastweekinaws.com/review.
This has been a Humble Pod production. Stay humble.